So this weekend, the Crimson Tide will be hosting some of the nation's top prospects. But given that the transfer portal just closed, I think it's only right that today we focus in on three names, three transfer portal visitors that you need to know about. Two defensive backs and another player on the defensive side of the ball that has an immense understanding of the defense from the jump. And we've got to dive into it. But before we can, as always, y'all know the drill. I have got to hear from you. Hop down to the comments, give me a Y for yes, N for no. Do you believe Alabama exits the weekend getting some recruiting wins, specifically wins via the transfer portal? Can't wait to hear from you. If you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe. Hit that bell notification as I do constant college football content. You don't want to miss any of it. And if you enjoyed the content, be sure to like and comment down below. But having said all that, let's jump right into this. And whenever we look at the transfer portal additions Alabama has made, there have been some names I'm really excited about, especially in the secondary, where Alabama has already gotten a Cam Howard from Charlotte. They've gotten a Damani Jackson, who I think is going to be a massive pickup, and certainly Keon Sabb follows Damani Jackson in that same thought process, where I think both those two guys are going to be huge pickups and are going to be major contributors to this Alabama defense in 2024. But one thing we need to understand, something that I've talked about, something that several other Alabama content creators have talked about, and something that even Kalen DeBoer has talked about, is that they want more depth, specifically in the secondary, but if we're being as specific as possible, outside corner. And every time we have this conversation, I want to provide this caveat. That's not to say that we are concerned, or I am concerned, with the talent that Alabama is going to field at corner. I think that there is a ton of talent in the room. When you get 3 5-star freshmen, then you have a Jaleel Hurley, who at one point was a 5-star in his recruiting class, and then you have Damani Jackson, who is a top 10 player in the nation, regardless of position coming out of high school. You know you've got talented guys in the room. In my opinion, the only problem is the lack of bodies, and we've seen injuries affect Alabama before. The other day, I talked about that national championship game against Georgia, and everybody points out the lack of the two receivers that Alabama had. One went down in the game, the other went down before the game. But Alabama was also without their two top cornerbacks in that game. So we've seen how injuries can affect a team down the stretch, and football is a violent game. Yes, I love the talent in the room. Yes, I think these guys are going to be fantastic. I think once you give them an opportunity, they're not going to look back. There's a reason why I've continued to call this defensive back class Nick Saban's parting gift. And we just talked about the cornerbacks. How about the safeties, where yes, Peyton Woodyard goes to the transfer portal, but even when he transfers, you still have Dre Kirkpatrick Jr., you still have Red Morgan, you still have these guys in the back end of this secondary that I think you need to be really excited about. But having said all that, let's jump into the first visitor we're going to talk about. And given that I think the biggest need for Alabama right now is outside corner, we're going to start with Deshawn Jones from Wake Forest, who stands 6 foot, 181 pounds per ESPN. And if we look, he had a productive 2023 where he had 27 solo tackles, 3 interceptions, and 2 passes defended. Now, one of the things you're going to notice whenever you look at Jones is that he is an experienced defensive back, and that's one of the things you would love to add into this room. Though I think the most pressing issue with the room right now is lack of numbers, you also want some experience, because that experience helps the young guys get acclimated and helps them start learning a little bit easier. It's part of the reason why I'm so excited for Malachi Moore to be back, because you've got some secondary guys in the safety room that I think are going to be very good. But I really like that you get to pair them with their upside with a Malachi Moore, who has so much experience in such a high football IQ. I really like that. And Deshawn Jones is a name that we have got to watch, because I think the Alabama staff is going to full court press him, if I had to imagine. Now, once again, I'm just an opinion piece. I'm just a fanalist. I have no inside knowledge, but given the fact that Hamilton, the Houston cornerback, was set to visit this weekend, then canceled his visit and instead will be visiting Ole Miss, in my opinion, it stands to reason that given the need for cornerback, given that Kalen DeBoer has been forthright about the need for cornerback, they're going to make sure Jones is a priority. And because of that, I'm really interested to see what they're able to do if they're able to get a commitment. But luckily, he's not the only defensive back visiting. There's also King Mack, who's transferring from Penn State and who played his high school football at St. Thomas Aquinas. Now, when you look at King Mack, the one thing that I love about him is that he is a rangy defensive back. And he provides something that, while Jones may not, it's an interesting balancing act. With Deshawn Jones, you don't have a lot of eligibility remaining, but you have a ton of experience. With King Mack, you don't have a ton of experience, but you have a ton of eligibility remaining. Now, I do think it's important to note that King Mack is listed as a safety, but I think he's got the versatility to play that husky, that rover, or the safety position, meaning you can min-max what you're doing in the secondary. But I love when you can get a guy into a room that has some talent, like the safety room at Alabama has some experience and has a bit more numbers than does the outside cornerback room, and you can get a guy that has eligibility remaining. Listen, in a perfect world, you want to get a guy that not only has experience, but eligibility remaining. And Mack gives you that eligibility. I'm very interested to see what he's able to provide once he picks his destination, and hopefully it is Alabama. But he entered the transfer portal this week, and it did not take long for him to get that Alabama visit scheduled. And finally, we talk about a player that has a real familiarity with this Alabama defense, and that's Khalil Jacobs, who's familiar with Alabama defensive coordinator Kane Womack, as he just played for him. Now, Khalil Jacobs is a linebacker, and whenever you look at this, Alabama has got their front two guys absolutely set in stone with Deontay Lawson and Campbell. And I think they're going to turn heads, this nation. I've said this several times, but I'm not going to be shocked at all if all of these preseason publications come out with their rankings and Lawson and Campbell are on every top 5 linebacker list in the nation. I think they're that good, especially when they're healthy. But one thing you can't argue with is competitive depth. It's the same conversation we're having about cornerback. It's the same conversation we're having about every position on the field, and it's a conversation we've been having since Nick Saban was here. This isn't relegated just to Kalen DeBoer. This is a conversation we've had for years. Iron sharpens iron. And with Khalil Jacobs, one thing that you get that no transfer thus far has been able to provide on the defensive side, because on the offensive side, you have Jeremy Bernard, you have Cuevas, you have Austin Mack, you have Parker Brailsford, all having an understanding of the DeBoer offense. On the defensive side, you don't have that player who can come in day one and be a coach on the field. Jacobs gives you that. He is a very athletic linebacker, a linebacker that I have no doubt several schools are going to be after. And if he is to come to Alabama, this is a move, in my opinion, with 2025 in mind. Because yes, Lawson and Campbell, they're going to be your front runners for 2024. But it gives you depth in case of an injury. It gives you somebody that can come in and instantly be like, hey, this is what this defense is trying to do. This is what we can do in this situation. And that will help every player on the field get acclimated. I think these are very intriguing visitors Alabama's getting via the transfer portal, and I'm really interested to see whether or not they're going to exit the weekend with a big-time recruiting win, but that's where I need to hear from you. Hop down to the comments, let me know what you're thinking about these three, and let me know, do you think Alabama exits the weekend with a recruiting win, 2 recruiting wins, or do you think they get the clean sweep and get all 3? Can't wait to hear from you. That's it. See ya.